Welcome back, everybody. Today we're gonna take a look at abstracting our content feeds, right? So at the moment we have the submission feed, which is nice, but for example, we have other content that we want to put in this feed format, and maybe it's not gonna work off a scroll, but primarily the comments, right? We want the comments to load a specific amount, and then if you reach the end and you want to load more, it's essentially a feed, not a scrolling one, but a manually loading one. So as you want to go deeper into the comments, you have to press a button this time, right? So let's go ahead and work towards that abstraction. The first thing that we're going to do is we are going to do something that's actually going to help us extract the comments. So specifically here, the way that we moved all the endpoints to work off of this endpoint, we're going to move all the other endpoints to work off of this get endpoint in terms of getting the comments, right? So we're going to have to go and fix some stuff. But primarily how we have the parent ID and the parent type, that is how we are going to go off here. Let's go ahead and provide this. So parent ID, and another thing will be parent type. Okay, so a couple of things that we'll need to supply in here. The integer stays. Let's make this a function because we're going to need to use a couple of things. We will just return this, and we will create a var source that's going to be based off of the parent. I think we can just use the parent type here straight away. So parent type, just like that. And I can't remember if we will need to grab anything from services, but for now, I think this will be okay. So just parent ID and parent type, and I don't think we will need we won't actually need a source. We will need a filter. So something that we can put into this where clause. So specifically, this is going to accept an expression, which is going to be a func. So this is going to be a familiar thing that we're doing here, right? So specifically off the parent type, we want to perform a switch expression. And let's say if, what's it called? Parent type is, let's grab the whole thing here, right? So parent type is moderation item. That means we want to return something like an expression of comments, and comments, we will be comparing the moderation item ID to the parent ID here. Okay, so a little bit on the long side, but that's essentially what these are going to look like. Let's go ahead, copy these a little bit and type these out, right? So submission is gonna work based off the submission ID. Am I missing a comma on the end there? Yep. So submission ID, and the last one will be comment. So if it's a comment type, we're going to be working off the parent ID, I believe. Yep. So this is going to be the filter. So now what's going to happen is we're going to take the filter and we're just going to pass it here. Okay. The other thing that we specifically want to abstract and reuse all over the place is the what's called the feed functionality. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we use it now. And first, we are going to just get rid of how we get the comments from the submissions and the moderations as well, right? So these two comment feeds can go. We're going to now extract them from this single endpoint, okay? The other thing is now looking towards how our feed works. So on the submissions controller, do we have anything here that uses the feed? No, I think it would be on the tricks controller. All right, here, yeah. So list of submissions for the trick. Let's go into the pick, what's it called? Pick submissions, and we're gonna break this apart a little bit depending on what we need, right? So this currently lives in trick data. So we are going to introduce the feed query on here. And this object specifically, what it's going to do is it's going to have these bits like order, cursor, and limit. Right, so how much or count, I will call it limit. So string order, let's see what else do we need, int cursor, and the last bit would be int limit, right? So that's pretty much how much stuff we need. So going back to the query extensions, and we are going to pick this function apart a little bit. Let's go ahead, just copy it first. And what we're going to do here is rename this to order feed, okay? And the feed is going to be ordered based on different constraints, okay? So specifically, we can say that this is going to be of some kind of type, and we can pass the type here. So it's a source of type. And instead of these parameters here, now what we can do is let's pass the feed query. So feed query right there. The order by descending, this is now going to be resolved based on what type T is. So if we're dealing with submissions, we are going to use the submission ordering. If it's going to be comments, we're going to be going off whatever ordering comments give us, right? So let's first of all get rid of the ordering right here. Grab the feed query. We will put the cursor from here. Feed query again, and the limit. And one thing on the limit, I think it's worth just providing 10 on here as a default value. If it can be overridden, I don't think that will be a good idea, but let's take it out of here. So it's a static value of 10, right? Now, let's go ahead and filter our source, right? So our source is going to come in as is, and if we are hitting some statements, so we can say source is something like iQueryable of type submission, and we can say submission source. And now, because it's a submission source, we can go ahead and override this query right here, right? So submission source, and specifically this thing, so order submissions, we will provide the order just as is. Let's put this on new line everywhere, so maybe you can see it. Nope, my portrait is covering this just enough, so let me actually drop this down and maybe move this out of the way. Right, so just pass the order into here, and that's specifically how we're gonna order this. We no longer need to pass the cursoring stuff in here. We are literally just interested in this sort of ordering, right? So then we go ahead and order submissions, and all we have to do is from the feed query pass the ordering, okay? One thing, we're gonna get a bit of a problem here, but all we want to do is we basically just want to convert it back into the type that it was, right? So, and I mean, that's becomes no longer a problem, right? Otherwise, if the source becomes a comment source, all right? So comment, we want to be able to order by some kind of constraints that comments provide. So what kind of constraints can we have if it's a comment? And I'm just gonna say that it's either going to be the latest or the first comment. So in the order that they came in, or the latest comments that are being said on there, okay? So those are the two primary orders that I can think of, so let's go ahead and get them in here. So instead of order submissions, we're gonna say order comments. For this is gonna look a little bit slightly differently. So we will just say something like order, and because I mean, latest, this isn't as a rocket sciencey as this, where we need a different bracket. I mean, we can probably just we probably don't need to do this, and we can just do what we're doing here. But I mean, we already have that written, so tough. Okay, so on source, we're going to apply a source order by descending, and we're gonna say something like comments, or not comments, created. I don't. Do we have that here? Created. So created is on the submission. Okay, so that was on the submission. So I actually want this to be a comment. Let's go ahead and change that. And created, I don't have that here. Okay. So let's actually go back to the submission that I have here, and let's take this created property. I'm gonna cut it, and I'm just gonna go ahead and put it on the base model here as well, or just on the base model. So all the properties that I inherit from the base model will now have the created property. Okay, so the time at which it was created at. So back at the query extensions, what we want to say is otherwise order equals, I don't know, first. Let's go ahead, copy this. Looks pretty much the same, except we're actually just gonna use the order by creator, right? And at the end, we just return the source. Okay, so this is how we would order our comment feed, and we would order our comment feed if our source is a comment feed, and if we actually need to order it, if we have the order present at all, right? Otherwise, it's just gonna run through it, and no problem. So on here, we're going to be using the comment source, and the comment source, let's go ahead and actually order comments, okay? And that should be fine. So if it's a submission source, we try to order by submissions. If it's a comment source, we try to order by comments. Both of these are, you know, have their respective logic, and this thing is here. Okay, so let's go ahead back into the controllers, and let's try to use the order feed and grab the feed query from the URL as well. So in the tricks controller, first where we have this pick submissions, what we're going to do is we will say order feed, and what we'll need to do is pass a feed query to this. Okay, so let's go ahead and pass a feed query to here. We will say from query, because this is going to be filled out as a query parameter, and let's go ahead and put this here. Okay, and that's all we're gonna need. So anywhere where we're implementing a feed and we need it ordered in some way, based on which entity it's which is in question, we need to do this bit here. Okay, so let's open up our solution. Let's see on the user controller. There is another bit that we will need to change, so get rid of this order and cursor, and here let's go ahead and say order feed. Let's pass our feed query, and the last bit is on the comments, because this is actually going to be a feed as well. So let's pass the feed query into here. After the where, let's say order feed, and pass the feed query into here as well. Okay, so one thing that's being highlighted here is that we don't have a default thing here, so yeah, let's throw argument exception, and we'll say something like name of parent type, or yeah, I think just throwing the argument exception is okay. I don't know, the middleware can pick it up or whatnot. That is essentially cleaning up the feed querying and ordering amongst the different types and different endpoints as we need to use them. As it goes for the comments, again, we consolidated to one endpoint as well. Another thing that I wanted to take a look at is this create flat function. So the way that we're using it here, every time this is invoked, this is going to get called. So let's go ahead and just uncomment this. We will say that this is create flat cache, because we comment this, we compile this expression once, and then we can just use it. Okay, so again, the reason we're not using this one specifically, this thing right here, is because I don't know exactly what's the difference, but entity framework, this is an object, this is you know, a actual method function definition within a class, so, and this is a property, so there is that difference. So I guess whenever you're traversing it in LINQ, it's gonna, you know, provide some information that entity framework hasn't accounted for. I mean, can't blame them for it, the library is already amazing, but now this should be just you know, that little bit faster, and I think doing that as well is okay. So coming back to our application, let's go ahead and start working on this. So giving this a refresh, there is our stuff. So let's go ahead and first see if anything is broken at all. So if we go on this feed, we can see it is still working, right? So because it's passed in the query, everything, I mean, everything is still the same. As with all the other stuff, in order to test our comments, to make it a lot easier, we're gonna make some seeds, okay? So let's go ahead back into here. Let's go into program, and for at the bottom, wherever we were doing all of this malarkey here for all of these submissions, what we're going to do is we're going to add a bunch of comments as well with which we can play around with, right? We are just going to copy this bit here, enumerable. Let's put it here. As it goes for the range, we're just going to create 20 comments. This is going to be a new comment. Okay. As it goes for the user ID, that is okay. Let's create some kind of content where we're going to say main comment, and we will put in the index. So I and oh, a little bit too much Python there. So I think, oh no, actually we can use II. And here we're still on a good level here. So II, main comment II, user ID is fine. I think we can duplicate this for HTML content because that's the thing that is actually going to be displayed. Yeah, so that's going to be displayed specifically for the submission feeds. Next thing is, let's go ahead and just copy this whole thing again. And what we're going to do is for each comment that we create, for each comment, we're going to add a bunch of replies. So replies is going to be the same thing, except we're going to increment the I here, and we'll just say reply instead of the main, and reply here. Okay, so we're going to have 20 main comments and 20 replies. Let's go ahead and see that. Let's refresh here, and I think I'm going to need to sign in. Yep, so let's sign this in. Close this, and let's take a look at this. And yeah, so first things first is we are going to be missing our endpoint here. So let's go ahead, close all the windows, let's collapse this, and I think this will be defined on the submission itself and the way that we load these comments. So actually, let's go into the comment section, because yeah, we no longer need to do this, and that's actually pretty cool. So let's go ahead and grab this URL here. Let's just put it in the endpoint. We are just gonna go to the comments endpoint, and grabbing this, putting it here, and grabbing the parent type. Okay, so this endpoint right here no longer needs to exist. So let's go ahead, give this a refresh. Let's go ahead, open up the comments, and on the first couple, I don't think we should have anything. Okay, so this one gives a 500. That means, you know, something is happening. Let's go ahead and take a look. And the error looks like we're not getting a user record, which is quite okay. So coming back to the program, all the users that made these comments, I don't think these, we don't actually have the user IDs existing, right? So we don't have that link. So when we create the users, we create the identity users, we don't create the actual users in the platform. So how we add the user here, let's go ahead and do the same thing. And we are going to remove this JPEG for these users, and let's just go ahead, grab the fake user. We'll grab the username and just grab the fake user here and put them here, right? So this should give us a bunch of users. We will need to re-log in here. So let's give this a refresh. Okay, test. Oh, password. Going back here. Scrolling a few comments down. Let's open this up, and there we go. So first things you're gonna notice is we don't actually have profile images for these. So let's go ahead into the user header. And in the user header where we have the image here, we want to save the if we have the image URL. Otherwise, I think we can just use the icon, and it will be something like MDI account, and we can say VLs here. Okay. So yeah, if we don't have the image, this should get replaced with account, right? So there it is. Again, how this looks right now doesn't really matter. We are more interested in this feed functionality. So at the moment, this is kind of like gets loaded automatically, and I think if I would have pressed have a load more button here, it would just it wouldn't cursor or anything, because we don't actually have cursoring in our comments. So all the cursoring, all the collection of the content that is in the feed, let's go ahead, kind of try to extract it from our submission and share it with the comment component. Okay, so hopefully this is not the first time I'm applying this sort of tactic. I'm either, you know, I have a component or I have a class, I'm extracting that into a separate class and I'm sharing it between other classes, and a general, you know, development cycle is you have a, you try to not re-implement things as soon as you see a pattern that can be reused. Use your programming, you know, skills, reuse that shit. So anyway, going into the components, where we have let's just have the submission open, because is it in the submissions or is it in the, I don't know, wait, we had the submission feed, right? So the submission feed is the bit that has all the feed stuff, right? Let's go ahead and create a mixin so we can inject our components with this functionality, right? So JavaScript file, let's create a feed and let's export const feed. And this is going to be an object. And what are we gonna have in here, right? So let's see. First thing is for the this thing. I've tested it out and passing the URL works much better, I think. So we're gonna take a look at how we will do this. So first of all, let's take the data, let's put it here, and let's see what we'll have. We'll also put the limit here for future works to kind of like acknowledge that there should be a limit, but we're not actually going to be setting it in the model, okay? So limit is at 10, finished. This is something, you know, that that the thing can do. Tab, this is not specific to the feed functionality, so we can remove that. Submissions, these are content feeds. So as being a feed, you know, it is just content that is fed to you, right, through an endpoint. So that is for the data. Next thing is the watcher that we had. Oh, one thing that we're missing is actually the order, right? And that is going to really tie in with the watcher that we're about to put here. So the thing with the watcher is it watches the tab, and the tab is really the thing that regulates the order. So the thing that we want to do is we just want to basically say, watch the order now. And every time the order is going to change, this is when we reset the content, the cursor, and, you know, we change the finish stuff and we handle submissions. So handle submissions, what is that about, right? That's when we actually, as well, when we create the feed, we do this thing, and then we have the on scroll stuff with the function. So let's go ahead and just grab all of this stuff. Let's put this here and let's sort through it. So console log submissions, I don't think we need to do this anymore, this query. Let's take it out so we have an error instead, which we will need to fix. Let's just put a couple of dots here. For then submissions, let's say that this would rather be content, and then we're gonna check the content length, and let's say if the content length is less than this dot limit, because if it's 9 already, you know, we're running out. So it's just not to make that one extra request. We don't need to do it, right? The cursor is fine in terms of this content submission. So this content on here, yeah, that's where we're pushing stuff, and that's fine. So then the function to stop the loading, that's fine. The URL, right? The endpoint. What we're going to do is we are actually going to say, let's pass it in the props, right? So content endpoint, this is going to be required false, and type string. Okay, so this is something that we can specify. It's not something that we need to specify, and the reason for this is I'm gonna show you why. So I'm gonna skip a little bit forward for what I'm going to implement. You can't see the reason yet, but you will be able to understand once we get there. So we either want to use the content endpoint or we want to override it. With the mixin, you cannot override the props, you can override data, and you can override methods. So what we're going to do is we're going to implement the get content URL, right? And we want to be able to override this specific thing. So specifically, I'm saying specific way too much, so, you know, pardon me. this content endpoint, this is what we want to return, and then we had some kind of query. But the real thing that's going to happen is when we're actually loading on the submissions, what we will have is actually the Axios call to this get content URL, right? So get content URL, right? So this is a function that we're going to execute, and instead of handle submissions, we're going to say load content. Load content here. We will not have the created bit on here, so this is something that should be initialized from the other components, right? Or initiated. So content.length, that is fine. Axios, I thought I was missing something, but we're gonna do a .get, and that is gonna be the return, right? So hopefully everything here is more or less understandable. It's gonna look it's gonna make a little bit more sense once we get into here, right? Or start replacing this bit here. Next thing is the order. So the order we will actually be able to set on the component itself. So because it's a data field here, right? So we will be able to set it. The other bit is the query. So the query is fine. I mean, it's pretty much still the same. So it's still computed query. You know, it's the good old query. Let's pass the limit in here. You know, it's fine. We are not going to be binding it because if we look at the feed query, the limit we don't have any setter. So maybe this is gonna cause errors, maybe not. But in order to enable this, all we have to do is flip a switch on the back end, essentially. On the end here, we have the question mark and, so we can just say this query on here, okay? So how much will this actually replace, okay? Let's go ahead, take this, start at the top again, and this is what we're going to do. Make sense? Feed, and there we go, right? So props load submissions, the function that we're triggering here. This is no longer what's going to be happening. We're going to be feeding the endpoint instead, right? So this is going to go for the data. The only thing that's going to stay is the tab, right? Because this is specific to here. And the tab itself, we're gonna, this is no longer what happens. What we really want to do is we want to change the order when the tab is changed, right? And this is really going to be driven through here. So if we grab this, we remove this order. And when the tab changes, we want to check the new value. And really, this is what's going to happen. So this order will get assigned this. So we will say new value or new value here. Yeah, this is the thing that's going to happen. One thing that we want to do with it is we want to get rid of this created. And the reason for that is sometimes what people don't know, what you can do is you can put this as a handler and you can say that this is immediate, right? So the first time that this occurs, trigger this function, and this should basically trigger straight away. And what's going to happen on the feed, the order is going to change, and once the order changes, it's going to start loading the content, okay? So I'm back in the feed right now, in the submissions. This is when we're watching the tab. What else is going to change? All this stuff can go because all the on scroll is in the feed now, and the query itself, we don't need to touch it as well, right? So we pretty much almost eliminated everything from here. The only thing that we're changing is really this tab functionality. Submissions, this is really now going to come from the content that is from the feed. And the primary thing to understand is where are we using the submission feed. So we're using it in two places. And again, just remember, we need to specify an endpoint where we're going to be loading the content from, right? So wherever we're using this, we need to specify. So in the trick where we have the load submissions, this is no longer the thing that is going to be there. We're going to have a content endpoint. The content endpoint itself, we pretty much just grab this. What is this query that has been here? Okay, so that's something that we've been passing there. So, you know, I already forgot what it was, but that's how you know it's a terrible idea. So you put this there, get rid of this methods here, and make sure that you don't use this in your template. And I think that is fine here. Let's go ahead and open the index file that is for your profile. And we want to do the same thing here. So we want to replace this bit here. So let's go ahead and grab this endpoint here. We will remove this on where we have the submission feed. Why do I have two submissions? A bunch of submissions, and I think I never removed it. That's actually bad. Let's get rid of that because we got the submission feed. So yeah, this is replaced with content endpoint. Profile ID, we can literally just grab it from here, so that is fine. Okay. Load submissions, let's get rid of that, and there it is. So change profile image, I think that stays, but yeah, the submission feed, that's where it ends up, right? So this is how we're going to be loading the feed. So let's come back here. Let's give this a refresh and let's just double check that the feed is still loading and we are getting no errors. So let's scroll down, and yeah, so the content keeps on loading. We no longer get the log because I removed the console log, right? But the the moral of the story is that content keeps loading. Now, actually 20, where do we stop? 10, 20, 18. That looks a little bit suspicious, you know? A little bit suspicious. I'm not sure. It seems like we're missing one or two items, but I'll take a look at what this is, but that's not important. Right now, what's important is the comment feed, right? So we want to take what we've had there and get it into the comment feed. So the first thing is the comment section. So let's go take a look at it. So can't keep the feed open because we got all this stuff here that we kind of want to take a look at. Where was the comment section, right? The thing that's going to happen here is this container right here. This is going to be replaced with a feed, okay? So we're really no longer going to have the container anymore. We are going to, because the content is going to come from the feed. And here you can see that it doesn't matter where the comment section is, it's still going to load its comments from that singular endpoint. So that doesn't really need to be specified. And this is the primary reason where I want to be able to override the get URL endpoint from within the component itself. So now what we need to do is on here, we'll create methods, get URL, and on here we will return this, right? And because we are gonna have this query, right? So that's still the fully fledged URL, and as it goes for this content loading on this create, we no longer need to do that, okay? What else can we do, right? Let's give it a little bit of div, let's give it a class, deflex, justify, center, all the good stuff, the button, that looks like a really tolerable v button, load more comments, or let's just stop at load more, outlined, small on click, and load content, right? As for this, these two errors here, so first the comments are going to come from the content itself, and the prepend comment, again, let's just use a lambda, it's not too scary. We can use the content, and prepend was on shift if I'm not mistaken, right? And let's just put the comment on there. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like, right? So let's give this a refresh. Scroll a bit down here, so load more. There's our first comments, there's our second comments, right? And then there is nothing more. So let's say if we are if not finished, and I think still on created, we can say this dot load content, which you've seen there when we opened, the first comments didn't load, and I mean, that's pretty much it, right? So again, let's give this a refresh. Let's jump down here. So this is the first load. This is the next load, and yeah, and just because we have sets of 10, it's going to be one that doesn't load anything. But that's again something, as I said previously, with this feed. What you're going to have is you should have a wrapper with the next cursor and have the cursor either empty or some kind of flag that indicates, can you fetch more? So your UI is a little bit more, you know, intuitive. Load replies, right? Thing is broken. Where do we load replies, right? Let's take a look. So the replies themselves in the comments. So the comment is the thing that has the comment body for itself, and then it has the comment body for all the replies. So this container right here really should be a feed, okay? And again, let's slowly go through all these things. So append comment, we can just use a simple lambda where on the comment we push the comment. Let's go ahead, copy this lambda and replace the other append. Comments are now going to be coming from the content. The methods, again, I'm just gonna go ahead, grab this. I'm gonna get content URL method right here, and the created one as well. I think that will be okay. Parent type, will we need that? Let me just take a second. Yeah, so that's not going to be a problem. Load replies, we're gonna say load content, and on the URL itself, this parent type, I don't think that this parent type actually exists on this comment, but I think it won't be a problem if we just go ahead and, you know, use this, or even this right here. It shouldn't be a problem. And create it, I think we can get rid of that. I think that is it. Any other errors? Nope. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's give this a refresh. We don't have any comments there. Let's see here. Load replies and 400. I have an undefined, so on the first one, so the parent ID. So whatever parent we were supplying, that is, you know, invalid. So we actually want to set it to the comment ID. So what is the parent? That is the parent ID, and you know, what is the type? It's the comment type, right? And the query, I mean, the query comes from the feed. It's already self-explanatory. So again, taking a look at this, let's take a look at one of these. Load replies. There are our replies. So reply 15 through 6, and that looks a little bit weird. Might be the increment or whatever, but we'll take a look. So let's go ahead and add some buttons. So the load replies right here. So what we're going to do is load replies event, and we're going to make this a dynamic binding. So load replies, let's go ahead and say return this dot content. If we are on 0, that's when we want to display this button, right? Or maybe we should have some kind of, like, it might have or started loading, right? So let's say something like started false, and on the first load content we'll just say this dot started equals true. Okay, so the first time we load stuff, we start, and I think it's worth setting started to false here as well. Okay, so coming back to the comments, the thing that we want to return here is the name of the load replies event, and that's the thing that we want to bind. Otherwise, don't bind anything. So that is just going to make the button vanish. So we just basically replace this here, and yeah, we dynamically bind the event. Okay, and then the same spiel as we had in the comment section here for load more. Let's go ahead, grab this div. We will put it below the comment body, and I think margin left was yeah, I think it belongs in here. So let's go ahead, give this a refresh. That looks a little bit wonky. Load more, yeah, we want to load replies or load more. So we want to maybe make this disappear here. So let's say, content length more than 0, and not finished. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so that's gone. So load replies, there's our first set of replies, load more replies, there they are. So that looks a little bit weird. Let's take a look at the program first. And I think actually it might be because we are not setting any sort of ordering for these, so you know, it might be that. So let's just scroll down here, and that actually looks all right. So yeah, so I think it is just the ordering. One thing you can see, I actually just noticed that this is grayed out, so let's actually just use the X here, because the C for content is there, you know, so that's comment, and that's you understand, right. So load replies event, don't listen to that, that is used there, so you can see how once we pressed the load replies button, it has disappeared, right? So that's what that does. Now the ordering, what do we want to do about the ordering? So when we create it, let's go ahead and say something like order, and we'll say this order, I will say latest, right? So hopefully that's yeah, that kind of yeah triggered all of the comments. So and you know, well, the initial iteration, right? So maybe we can do something with the feed that might set the order by default. So let's go ahead and change this to a function where we will provide the order, or the default order. Later on this can be changed to a object from which we can grab the seed or whatnot, but for now the order will do, right? So the feed itself, for the comment section, we will say something like latest. I'm not going to implement anything regarding sorting in here, and let's actually do first. And the thing here as well, we're gonna do first created. We're not gonna put this here. The other place I think we used submission feed, so here we'll say latest to start with. I think that's fair to say, right? Let's go ahead, take a look. Or we might not even provide anything, or we don't need to provide anything, yeah, because this is not going to change. So we can basically say that it's empty. All right, so let's again give this a refresh. Scroll a bit down. Let's take a look here. So first initial comments loading. If we load more, nice. If we load replies, button disappears. Comments are in order. Let's just quickly check that this is still working on the moderation item. So yep. Reply, yep, reply. Okay, so that seems like it's working. Give this a refresh, and yeah, because, or maybe having the 401, so that component seems to have rendered before we had you know, before we were authorized. Let's take a look at what we have here. Was it with a guard? Right here, right? So we had a guard. I think this will need something like a data. And we'll say, well, does it really need a data? I think I think I would rather have a computed and really have one of these store thingies here. So I don't think we'll be able to use them we won't be able to use the stores from this function here because the scope is kind of here. But from here, for this computed map getters, I don't think this should be a problem at all. So from Vuex, let's get this from auth, and we will get something like authenticated. Are you authenticated? Yeah. So, and on here in mod ID, let's say if mod item, so if we are getting mod item, and I guess authenticated, is that not picking it up? I guess maybe not quite as powerful to find that. Okay, never mind. Let's actually see if this works, right? So if we give this a refresh, we shouldn't see any errors. The comments themselves are not loading first try, so that would mean We are maybe creating them incorrectly, so let's check the network tab. What's going on here? So real quickly. So the first one is 0, 1, and 0, so that looks okay in terms of how we create the comments. So let's take a look at this. So this is a post, parent type and parent ID, that is fine. So how come we don't get anything from this endpoint? So preview looks okay, content is null, user is there. How come that doesn't get assigned? Let's take a look at the comment section. I'm really not sure. Just think it's weird that it doesn't get assigned. So let's take a look at this again. In the mod ID, do we have anything that says kind of like how we're loading this, or maybe we're initiating this load? And no, that doesn't happen here. And on the comment section as well, we're literally just surfacing the component, which, you know, already has the feed, and once it creates it, that's when it loads the content, and the parent type and parent ID is grabbed from the parent component. So I guess there's only kind of one way to find out. Let's console log the content here, and let's see if you know, it's coming through at all on this side. So give this a refresh. There are the 3 items. Really bizarre that we are not getting. Look at that! Oh no! Look at this thing, man! What? What is going on here? Right? So, what can we do about this, right? So finished content length minus limit. I think that's really the constraint here. Otherwise, I don't think regarding how much content there is, just try to push through all of it. This is probably going to explain why we weren't getting all the items on the submission. So after this, I'm gonna go check and see if that's that. And here, I think what we can do is we can say content.length and add that. So as for the cursor, just to be a little bit, just a tiny bit more correct, right? So that's that. The comments are there. So just a little bug needs to be fixed, and just don't press your bookmark tabs. So there it is. Let's scroll to the bottom. Should scroll to 20. Awesome. Comments working. Load replies. Load more. Okay. So I think comment sections and feeds are, well, the feed is now more or less abstracted. Anywhere where we need any other feed, we can implement that. This will be it for this episode. As always, if you enjoyed watching it, leave a like, subscribe. Any questions, leave them in the comments. Reach out to me on Discord. I stream on Wednesdays and Sundays. If you're a regular viewer, you already know this. You probably already visited my live streams, man. But you know, if you're watching these series, you're enjoying them, leave a comment. And as always, I'll see you in my next episode.